Is the trade deadline starting to feel real to y'all as the more and more rumors that pop up, the closer and closer I realize we are to the trade deadline? Josh Giddey's not quite where people had hoped he would be in his return. We'll talk a little bit about that. Is it a setback? Not quite, but it is some concerns there. Coby White is suddenly popping up in even more trade scenarios for the Hawks, and surprisingly enough, the Detroit Pistons as well. Nikola Vucevic might actually be staying put if a report is to be believed, and the Bulls have a huge opportunity to take advantage of a struggling Rockets team tonight. We're talking about all that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go into this content for today, y'all. So we already know Josh Giddey was, supposed to be out 2 weeks. Now that 2-week period of reevaluation actually ends tomorrow on Wednesday after it was, announced. But according to Joe Lorenzi of The Athletic, it may be a while before we see Josh Giddey saying this. Josh Giddey is rehabbing an injury slowly. Chicago's medical team is keeping tabs on his progress and apparently does not yet feel he's ready to take the next steps just yet. That's a little bit of a concern. That's going to cause some concern for some Bulls fans, right? Like, we've already been used to a player ramping up and then having to ramp back down and things like that. So I guess maybe at least that's not the case in this. There's no talk of him ramping up and then them realizing, oh no, we got to go back down on this. But it does seem like he's not yet at the place of his recovery where they had hoped he would be at the 2-week period. Billy Donovan did also talk a little bit about it himself, where he did specifically point out the fact that there's not been any regression for Josh Giddey. So that is the positive part in this. There is no regression yet in this injury for Josh Giddey, but it is a concern in the fact that, hey, he's supposed to be reevaluated as of the original timeline tomorrow, and it seems like he's just not at the place where the medical staff feels comfortable even doing that. So, with these hamstring injuries, it can be a little bit testy, right? Initially, there were some people who thought that Josh Giddey was going to be announced to be out for 3 to 4 weeks instead of the 2 weeks. So maybe this is more in line with that type of return timeline. But there's just no doubt about it that, and I was one that was expecting Josh Giddey to be back on the court by this weekend via the original timeline that they gave us. And now it seems like that may not be the case. Now, Josh Giddey, all-star bid, this isn't about all of that. I think all that's done when it comes down to this. But we do know the importance that Josh Giddey does have on the Chicago Bulls team as far as being one of the engines of the offense for sure that Josh Giddey is, his ability to rebound. He's one of only, I think, 2 players that are averaging 19 points, 9 rebounds, and the assists that he's averaging. But, missing out on that production, it's going to hurt for any team. And it does hurt the Chicago Bulls. Even in the games that the Bulls still are able to win, even with Josh Giddey being out, make no mistake about it, the absence of Josh Giddey, especially on the rebounding side of things, it definitely still hurts this team. And that's something that the Bulls are going to have to overcome. Now, Tre Jones has done as about as good of a job as you can, especially with the assist part of it. He's a solid rebounder himself as well, for sure, so no doubts about that. But, you just want to see this Bulls team complete. And Billy Donovan talked a little bit about that, too. Like, that you haven't gotten to see this group fully healthy. We're 5-2 when this group is fully healthy. So take that for what you will as far as whatever that means to you specifically. But for what it's worth, the Bulls are 9-11 in their last 20. They're 5-5 in their last 10, 2-3 in their last 5. So, there's still some things there that the Bulls are, there's still, they got to tread the water, right? Because this is, again, as I've said before many times, this is not a team that's going to tank. This is not a team that's going to prioritize, draft picks over trying to win basketball games. They're just not going to do that. But this is at some point your season does get away from you. They're 2 games below 500 now. They have 3 games this week against losing teams with losing records. This is the only one this week against the Rockets with the team with the winning record. So you like to think that they are able to make their move, but we've seen this Bulls team struggle against teams like that. So you just really don't know. But to truly evaluate this team, you do want them to be fully healthy. But like I said on yesterday's episode, which was the title of yesterday's episode, the Bulls can't wait on health. You just can't wait on health to fully evaluate this team. You have to do it because you're not going to have that month. You're not going to have those weeks of this team being fully healthy before the trade deadline. It just does not seem like that's going to happen at all for this team. And Josh Giddey's injury is one of the reasons why of that. We just got to try to navigate our way through that as a team like we have. The next man up mentality. Coby White's also going to be out in this game. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the game overall. But you just got to have the next man up mentality. And at some point, you do run out of next man up, right? But, that's just where the Bulls have to be. And they've had to be there this entire season. And we'll see what the future does hold for this Bulls team. But let's get into it, man. I've said this before, and I think this becomes true more each and every day. Basically, every other day, we're going to have new trade rumors for the Chicago Bulls. We got 2 new ones that pop up. One, again, with the team that we've already kind of heard about, that's the Atlanta Hawks. But one in a new team that Sam Vecenie talked about with the Detroit Pistons being interested in Coby White. But let's start off with this. Coby White. Reportedly, this one comes from Brett Siegel, that the Atlanta Hawks could still look to trade for Coby White. Now, this is something that we've heard before, right? That the Hawks move off of Trae Young. They could be looking to add another scoring guard. Maybe that's an interest in Coby White with his youth, how he fits the timeline kind of more than Trae Young did, and the fact that he's better off ball. He doesn't need the ball as much as Trae Young to be successful in that. And so this trade now, rumor that pops up, has the Bulls trading Coby White and Nikola Vucevic for C.J. McCollum, a 2026 first-round pick, the San Antonio Spurs first-round pick, which is going to be a lower first-round pick, but that is where some of the centers could be going in this draft, right? And then a 2026 second-round pick and a 2029 second-round pick. So you're getting one first-round pick that's lower. It's unprotected, but it's going to be in the 20s, right? Basically is where that's going to be. And then you have 2 second-round picks and C.J. McCollum for the expiring salary to match Coby White and Nikola Vucevic's salary. What this does for the Chicago Bulls is that it frees them up even more money, to spend, even though Vooch and Coby are both expiring contracts at the end of the season. C.J. McCollum is a veteran. Even if you do look to keep C.J. McCollum, he's definitely not going to re-sign for what Coby White's going to re-sign for, right? And C.J. McCollum, who just got to the Knicks, is clearly maybe not part of their long-term plans. And, he is going to provide some scoring for him, which is still a pretty damn good score even at his age. But, so that's what you're doing for the Bulls. Now, in this, you're also getting off of Nikola Vucevic's contract, which is probably why you're getting those 2 second-round picks back in this. The Hawks do need a center because of Kristaps Porzingis, and his POTS is the rare condition that he's suffering from. And so you have Okongwu, who could play next to Nikola Vucevic as well to provide some of that defense they want while they're getting some scoring. Now, you guys know how I feel about trading Coby. I understand it, right? That if it's a deal that actually improves you, the question then becomes about how do you value a low first-round pick from the San Antonio Spurs? And who do you think you can draft with that pick, right? That's what the Bulls would really have to be asking themselves. In that, if the draft were to happen now, the San Antonio Spurs pick would be, give me 1 second to pull that up, would it be 14th? Is that right? Huh. Okay. That may actually change some things, right? So I was expecting it to be more so in the 20s, but if you're saying that that's a low-end lottery pick, does that change your perspective on it? Because I'm not going to lie to you. It does change mine a little bit on that, right? Like, don't get me wrong. The Spurs right now are slated to pick 14th. The Bulls are slated to pick 13th, which is surprising considering that the Spurs are the second best team in the Western Conference. How does that work out? They're 27-12. How does that work out? There has to be something I'm missing. There has to be something that I'm missing. Is that really where the Spurs pick is? Oh, no. Okay. See, they have the pick swap there. Okay, that's where I knew I was tripping on that one. See, the Spurs pick would actually be 28th. Is where the Spurs pick would be. I'm like, that doesn't make a lick of sense. So it would be 28th is where that pick would be. So, you got to look at that. And, I don't know exactly how the Bulls would feel on that. You can get some talented big man, maybe that low in the draft. So we'll see. But, that it depends on the value of how you value that Spurs pick. That is the most important thing in that move. But, the Atlanta Hawks are a team that we've heard could come knocking for Coby White before. There's not really a big shock in that. The next team, though, becomes a little bit more interesting, and this one does come from Sam Vecenie of The Athletic, who was on the Game Theory podcast, and he talked about the fact that the Pistons could be looking to acquire, a player leading into the trade deadline, and he mentioned how the Pistons have a $14 million trade exception and how that could be a potential mechanism in them making a trade for Coby White. Now, here's the thing, right? I don't like just dumping off Coby White just into a trade exception because the picks aren't going to be great from the Detroit Pistons either, right? So I don't necessarily love that pick at all. But here's what I will say about this, right? And we're gonna shoot it fair when it comes to this one, is that Sam Vecenie also speculated that Paul Reed you could include Paul Reed in that trade. Now, Paul Reed's an undersized big, but he is an active big. And he is a big that could help the Bulls defensively. Now, how much do you view that defensive help over what you can get back in a case, in Coby White's offense? And that's what that would come down to. And that's what we just don't know how the feeling is when it comes to that for the Chicago Bulls or how they feel on Coby White. Now, I would say this, I don't feel like the Bulls are shopping Coby White. I feel like they're listening to calls for Coby, absolutely, as they should. I want to make no mistake about this. The Bulls should be listening to all offers for Coby White and anybody else for that matter, because that's just where we are as a team, right? So if the Pistons come calling and they want Coby, is it Jaden Ivey? Like, is it like let's say, all right, cool, let's swap young scoring guards. You want Coby, who's kind of more proven to be next to Cade Cunningham. All right, then give us Jaden Ivey and let us keep it pushing. Now, you can absorb some more salary into your trade exception if that ends up being the case, if the trade needs to expand some. But if the Pistons do come calling for Coby, to me, that's the first thing that I want, is we got to talk about Jaden Ivey and what that looks like for him. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not expecting everybody to feel like that is the case, but the Detroit Pistons also, because they would be absorbing him into their trade exception, they could be giving more picks up in that case to get Coby White. And that is the case where you look at it and you're saying, all right, so if the Detroit Pistons don't have to send any players back and the Bulls do decide to prioritize draft picks over trying to finish this season strong, because again, it's just so unlike the Chicago Bulls to trade a player and not get a player back. But let's say that they are interested in this case with the Detroit Pistons trade. They have a trade exception that can absorb his contract back. What picks do the Pistons have to offer? And that's where things potentially could get fun, because the Detroit Pistons have all their own first-round picks. They don't have a single protection. They don't have a single pick swap. They own all their first-round picks from 2026 all the way out to 2032. So in that case, are you then looking and saying, all right, bet we need to get one of those first-round picks off the Detroit Pistons? Let's say that we do get the pick of the Detroit Pistons, that you get that first-round pick in 2026 draft, which again is a very deep draft. So you could want to prioritize that pick. Now, it's not going to be high because the Detroit Pistons have the number one record in the Eastern Conference. As of right now, that pick will be 29th. But there are some power forwards, there are some centers that are slated to go around that area. I just don't necessarily think it's the best move for the Bulls. The Detroit Pistons, if they get Coby White outright for just to absorb into their trade exception, they'll have to send a player back to create a roster spot. That team is going to be is pretty deep in the East. So you're not getting an amazing draft pick back. So I think you would have to try to get a pick and Jaden Ivey or a pick and Paul Reed back in a case like that. And if that, I'm a little bit more open to it. It still doesn't make the most sense on paper, but I am a little bit more open to it. We just got to see if the Bulls are going to do it. So two more suitors have popped up for for Coby White. That is the Atlanta Hawks, who we already kind of known about, and the Detroit Pistons, who the Pistons are armed with. At least they're armed with their own draft picks that they have in the trade exception. So we'll see what happens with that one. But let's get into the part that I know everybody's going to hate. And this one comes from Brett Siegel in regards to Nikola Vucevic potentially staying with the Chicago Bulls team, saying this. Chicago has some options before the trade deadline because of all the expiring money they possess. Speaking of which, Nikola Vucevic, who's on an expiring $21.4 million contract, is a player that Billy Donovan and the organization value. It wouldn't be surprising if they held on to Vooch and looked to extend the veteran on a smaller, team-friendly contract in free agency. I've been saying this since last season at the trade deadline. Do not be surprised if the Bulls extend Nikola Vucevic. Now, I will say this. When I said that, it was when Nikola Vucevic was still one of the Bulls' most consistent players. He's not that anymore for the Chicago Bulls. He's not that at all anymore for the Chicago Bulls. So I'm not going to act like I still feel like it holds as much water, but it has always been an option that's out there. They can do basically similar to what they did with Lonzo Ball last season. They looked to move him. They weren't able to because they turned down a deal that would have actually end up being a good deal. And then they extended him to make it easier to trade him in the offseason. When Vooch is on the court so far this season, the Bulls have a negative net rating of 4.1. Their offensive rating actually goes down almost 4 points. Their defensive rating goes up. Going up is not good in defensive rating. Up almost 5 points when Nikola Vucevic is on the court. Just the fact of the matter is, Vooch is not impacting the game of basketball like he used to. Even when you look at Vooch as well and his scoring, almost 80% of his buckets are assisted. Now, centers are usually going to have a larger percentage of their buckets assisted, but when you look at Nikola Vucevic, that over the last couple of years, that slowly but surely been getting, that number's been rising because Vooch isn't able to create for himself as much as he once did. He's just not able to do that as much anymore. And so because of that, you're looking at Vooch and you're saying to yourself, okay, all right, Vooch, what are you really giving us? And that's where it comes down to that it's not a lot. It's just not a lot for Nikola Vucevic anymore when it comes down to it. And so I don't like it. And I want to be clear here. This is not me pushing this. This is not me saying that this is something that I want to see the Bulls do, but it is something that is a realistic possibility for the Chicago Bulls team. Nikola Vucevic could be re-signed by this Bulls team, and it would be one of the most misguided things that the Bulls have ever done because Vooch just does not impact the Bulls positively anymore. He's averaging 16.5 points, 9.3 rebounds, and 30.5 minutes per game. These are all the lowest numbers since the 2017-18 season with Nikola Vucevic. But he is the team's third leading scorer still behind Josh Giddey and Coby White. Modest hasn't passed him up yet. I do think he would with more opportunities. And it's clear that, you look at a team like Atlanta, they do need a big. You look at some of these other teams, they do, but these are teams that are very well looking at and saying, hey, we could wait until the offseason and sign Vooch for probably less than a mid-level exception rather than trade for him and give up assets now. So re-signing him would be basically to say, all right, now y'all have to deal with us. And I just don't know if that's the right gamble to take at this point. I don't know if that's the right gamble to take for this Bulls team where it comes at right now. The Bulls have held on to Vooch. They've wanted value back for Vooch. And people are saying the fall off for Vooch is eventually going to come now. And to their credit, it didn't look like it was going to come as soon as what it did, but the fall off is here now, and it's been real for Nikola Vucevic. And so now it's just like, hey, what is this going to look like for him? And that's what we don't know. So, according to Brett Siegel, and take all these rumors with a grain of salt, is that Vooch could be re-signed. And that is something that, even though I've been saying for over a year now, I don't like to hear. So we'll see what the future holds. But let's move into the last topic for today. The Bulls do have a game today, and that's against the Houston Rockets. Coby White is going to be out this game. Dorian Finney-Smith and Tari Eason are going to be out for the Houston Rockets. But the Houston Rockets are not the team that they were earlier in the season, right? At one point, I think they got up to third in the Western Conference, and they have severely fallen off from that. No doubt about that. Things are going to change. The Western Conference is just like that. When you look at the Houston Rockets and what they've done in their last 5 games where they're 1-4, their offensive rating has dropped off from being 4th best offensive rating team in the league for the season. They're playing with the 24th ranked offense in the last 5 games. In the last 10 games, it's gone down to 8th, right? So there's definitely been some offensive struggles here recently for the Houston Rockets. Their defense, which has been 9th best on the season, has dropped down to 12th over the last 5 games and down to 13th in the last 10 games. So this is a team that is not playing their best basketball right now. The Bulls are missing players. So are the Houston Rockets, though. The question then becomes about how can the Bulls take advantage of this? And there are some things that is going to make it tough for the Bulls, right? We talked about how the Houston Rockets offense has definitely fallen off. There's just no doubt about that. The offense has fallen off quite considerably here recently. And if the Bulls are catching the Houston Rockets on a day where their offense is just not there for them, that can help the Bulls out quite considerably, right? The Houston Rockets, with the offense falling off, the Bulls would have to play a very sound defense. But let's be clear here. The Houston Rockets are still the number 1 rebounding team in the league. They're the best rebounding team in the league and the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the league. Those are 2 areas that the Bulls have struggled against teams that don't rebound nearly as good as the Houston Rockets. Then when you look at also the Houston Rockets are 9th overall in steal percentage. They force those turnovers. That's been something that the Bulls have also struggled with this season. So the Bulls are going to have to play a sound game of basketball against the Houston Rockets. They're going to have to come into this game, regardless of how good or bad the Rockets have been over whatever stretch. This is a team that has a lot more talent. Period, point blank. They are a more talented team than the Chicago Bulls and just about every facet of the game, especially when you have already Coby and Josh Giddey out on top of all of that. So the Bulls, who on the season have the 21st ranked defense and the 21st ranked offense, you got a mountain and a molehill ahead of you in this game against the Houston Rockets. So what do the Bulls need to do? A, rebound the ball. You have to make it a game rebounding ball. This is why the Bulls need to rebound as a team. You need the whole total team effort when it comes to rebounding for this Bulls team for you to have any semblance of a chance against the Houston Rockets. You have to limit the turnovers. You have to do those type of things, but you have to use your pace to your advantage. This is a Houston Rockets team that the schedule recently has been crazy. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about the things that they went through with having to, in their hotel room, in the last game where they had to stay kind of far from the King Stadium. But they're riding a 3-game losing streak right now. 3 games. They lost two games against Portland and a game against Sacramento. Already struggling teams. Do not let this team get right against you, Chicago Bulls, before they take on the OKC Thunder on Thursday. So let's see if the Bulls can take care of business in this one. I'm really looking at Billy Donovan's coaching. I'm really looking at us using our pace to wear this team down where we can, but you got to rebound to use your pace. So we have to continually do that. Sengun is the type of center that Vooch usually has some pretty decent success against as far as defending. If you can do that, we have nobody. Isaac Okoro is going to have his job ahead of him when it comes down to guarding KD, as will Modest Buzelis, who's going to get rotated out on him some. But we'll see what this Bulls team can do because, man, the Houston Rockets are coming. They're a tough team, and the Bulls have been struggling. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But let me know your thoughts on that down below, y'all. That is going to do it for today's episode of Chicago Bulls Central. The trade deadline is coming fast. The roster is still in flux, as it has been all of the entire year. And this stretch could tell us a lot about the Chicago Bulls team. Make sure you guys drop your thoughts down below. Should the Bulls be buyers, sellers, or just stay patient? Yet again, should they take the deal for Coby from the Pistons or the Hawks? Do any of those potentially interest you? How do you feel about them potentially re-signing Nikola Vucevic? But hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.